I bring you a warning. Every one of you listening to my voice, tell the world, tell this to everybody wherever they are. Watch the skies, everywhere. Keep looking. Keep watching the skies.
I think science fiction is the greatest exercise for the brain. It is just, it just is like Pilates for the brain. You know, it really stretches your beliefs that anything is possible. And the reason I'm so interested in science fiction is because I have this overactive imagination. And I've always believed from childhood that anything is possible, but only science fiction can let you go there.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer that if you can imagine something, you can make it real. And, well, one thing movies do, in science fiction in particular, is that it really allows you to see something, so it comes into your imagination.
I loved cinema inordinately, to the extent in those days you could sit down, you could go in at 2 and you come out at 10. So and you weren't turfed out with a person with a torch saying, "Oi, get out," you know. As the lights went up, I would just sit and wait. So I'd go and get an ice cream and wait, and I'd see it 3 times at the time.
There are so many films, science fiction films, that I saw as a kid and as a teenager that have just left indelible images. I can just go to that file and flip through it and see those pictures as if I had just seen it yesterday.
Some of Steven Spielberg's indelible images are from the War of the Worlds. He had read H.G. Wells' classic novel before seeing the 1953 movie version. This probe has been sent out by aliens invading Earth with intent to colonize it. Spielberg's new film is a vast spectacle, more epic in scale than the 1950s sci-fi movies that haunted his childhood. But like those earlier films, it's a metaphor for the fears that began haunting everyone in the 50s. The atomic age ushered in the first great age of movie science fiction.
When you come to the Second World War, you've got a very specific enemy. You know what that enemy is. It's there for all the wrong reasons, and it should be prevented, okay? Then you've got the next phase, which is the Cold War, again, which is to do with paranoia, but I think real. It's real. Movies start to nip into that.
But no matter where they go or what they do, they always try to remember what to do if the atom bomb explodes right then. It's a bomb. Duck and cover.
I would have to say that there was a certain amount of anxiety about that. I mean, I grew up right in the very heat of that. And we did the duck and cover drills all the time. We were always hearing about building fallout shelters, about the end of the world. Kind of issues were always going on. How many bombs were being built? The Cold War was very in the media.
All of our fate as human beings, our destiny, seems bound up in our technology. And our technology is frightening. It's terrifying. Wow, the splitting of the atom. Something that we can't even see. Some forces that can only be guys in white coats. All of a sudden, the guys in white coats became these kind of simultaneously rock stars and the most evil thing you could imagine.
Mom? If I grow up, do you know what I'm going to do?
It's when you grow up, dear, not if.
So there was a great deal of anxiety in the air. It was not just fear of being beaten up by the local bully, but the fear was being nuked. I was more terrified of being nuked than my parents were. My parents couldn't imagine that an intelligent nation like Russia would ever push a button on us, nor would we on them. But we almost pushed the button on each other during the Cuban Missile Crisis. My parents went to a party the day the crisis reached that critical. I was watching television, and I had filled all the bathtubs up with water. Just every sink in one bathtub in my mom's bedroom, I filled it up with water, because I figured the water's going to stop. They're going to turn the water off, and this will be our drinking water. We had no hole in our backyard. We had no basement in Arizona. But I was prepared for Armageddon. I was absolutely prepared for that. And these movies in the 1950s and early 60s played on those fears. And these movies were all metaphors for those fears.
People started to think about, okay, this is what we know, which is a blast, but what about what we don't know? Out of that fear came, I think, a lot of the monsters, which you mess around with stuff, and you're going to unleash this unknown monster, tangibly unknown. And I think a lot of that has to do with the mystery of this silent death that comes along with it, that nobody knows exactly what it is or where it came from, or can't see it, can't touch it. Well, let's make it easier to deal with by making it a giant monster that looks sort of like a dinosaur that we can actually look at and then shoot guns at and stuff and kind of cope with.
Enemy fighters. Execute fell swoop formation.
There's a whole string of movies that came out where the smallest creatures that we just step on our way to school turned out to be giant, wound up stepping on us.
Wait a minute! What are you doing out here, honey? Honey?
What's your name? That little girl they find wandering the desert, and she's just absolutely in shock, in a complete state of shock, and they try to get her to speak, and she won't. Finally, she hears that really great sound effect that the ants made. It was from a distance, that kind of chirp, that constant. And she just looks almost at the camera.
I was never frightened. I was curious, and I would be looking at the screen thinking, how did they do that? How did they make that big? I didn't think about the camera.
I mean, I knew there was a suspension of disbelief that kind of said these are kind of corny, big things, but at the same time, they were scary enough to where I believed they were what they were.
And Edmund Gwen came on the screen. I said, oh my God, there's Santa Claus. That's Kris Kringle. Oh my goodness, Miracle on 34th Street. I was like, I couldn't believe he was in the science fiction movie. And so there's no credibility to the role because of the earlier picture he made.
Get the other antenna! Get the other antenna! He's helpless without the...
He was also the one that preached the gospel and gave the dire warnings to mankind and pointed a finger at mankind and said, we made this happen. We created this. We did this to ourselves.
Species appears to be Capanotus Vaginus. One of the family Formicidae. An ant. An ant? I don't believe it. It's not possible. And this is what got Ed Blackburn and Gramps Johnson an arrest? Yes. A fantastic mutation. Probably caused by lingering radiation from the first atomic bomb.
All these movies had some brainiac basically at some point or another saying, we only have ourselves to blame for this.
Unless these queens are located and destroyed before they've established thriving colonies and can produce millions of queens. Man, as the dominant species of life on Earth, will probably be extinct within a year or so.
Coming out of World War II, where every other guy walking around the street was a war hero for simply having survived the greatest action against evil that we could remember. You've got this lingering sense that the military saved us, that they're big guys, that they represent the best of us. And as the alien invaders, sometimes abetted by the scientists, sometimes created by the scientists, come in, it was always the guys with the tanks and the Tommy guns. The end of them, they're running around the sewers of Los Angeles with Tommy guns, shooting it out with the giant ants.
Ants are good because it's a known quantity. As long as you make it reasonably credible. I mean, everybody knows what an ant looks like, and everybody knows what an ant would look like if it were big. So if you make it look reasonably like an ant, you're okay. When you get into aliens or monsters and everything, then there's an aesthetic question of, is this a good enough monster to be what it's supposed to be? Are we getting our monsters worth out of it?
Yeah, the perfect fit. This will give you the full effect. You see, lots of character in the tail, plenty of fright. Needs a little puffing up, but it'll be all right. Of course, you gotta visualize it. The lights, you gotta use your imagination. Shoulder pads, straighten it right out. This'll give you the effect. It'll be good.
The secret is to not show the monster. The anticipation is greater than the reality, no matter what it is. When you have monsters from outer space or aliens, inevitably you finally show the monster. It's a difficult. When you try to make that real with film, you have to make it exist at some point, some way, that the illusion is there, that's what you're seeing. And that's always been a hard problem because it's really technical. And From malaise on, it's been how clever are you to trick the audience into believing something that it can't possibly exist.
Hey, you can see him from here!
One totally weird solution to the monster problem. Make them as inanimate as humanly possible.
Marlin Monsters is this quirky little film, obviously done on a obscene budget. But the monster is so bizarre. It's just these giant crystals that grow and then crash over. And they grow and crash over. And they fall on your house, and then they fall on your town.
Now, these films weren't movies directed by William Wyler and starring Montgomery Clift and Marlon Brando. No, this was a trickle-down factor. This went way below the front office down to the movie offices, those little wooden shingle bungalows way off in the back lot somewhere, right next to probably where they made the cartoons.
As early as 1953, Abbott and Costello were satirizing giganticism. But what if our atomic carelessness had a reverse effect? That's what writer Richard Matheson and director Jack Arnold imagined in his science fiction classic. Radioactive fallout is impossible to picture persuasively in a movie, but its consequences, in this case, lodge forever in the generations never.
Nobody quite knew what radiation did. They knew it killed you. They knew it deformed you. They knew it did horrible things. And obviously, but it wasn't concrete enough because you didn't kind of see it work. Incredible Intriguing Man was a scary movie to me. I was very young at the time, and obviously, for young people to get even smaller, I mean, you already feel small as it is. So for any young person who's trying to grow up, to say, no, once man, we're going to sprinkle you with magic atomic dust and you're going to get smaller and even less powerful. And as a matter of fact, there's nothing we can do to stop this. So it's like stripping away all sense of power. You're completely helpless. That was an extremely frightening idea for a young person.
Forget about a kid having a problem with suddenly getting smaller as opposed to getting bigger. How about a man who has a wife and all of a sudden he's diminishing? The psychology of that.
Kiss me. You think that's gonna fix it?
You didn't have to stretch. You used to stand on your toes when you did that.
In your stocking feet?
And I'm not even talking about the sexual side of that. I'm just talking about the idea of how you go into the power base in a relationship. Gets smaller and smaller, and eventually they grow apart.
Go to you. Come on. You want me to be?
Yeah, soon.
Good night.
Good night, boys.
The guy's house becomes this nightmarish place, and it's taking the familiar and turning it, and I think that's why it's so fascinating to people. Instead of science creating these giant monsters, it created a tiny guy, and now his cat becomes his mortal enemy.
I remember the danger with the cat. Science fiction filmmakers use cats almost symbolically to portray how we feel inside about something we can't express. Cats do things are much better than ours, and cats are more finely tuned to the dangers that surround us. Well, people are sometimes dumb enough to let the danger come right into their bedroom and kill them while they sleep. Now, of course, when I was a kid and I saw that movie, I'm more interested in the sewing needle fight with the tarantula. It was supposed to be a house spider, but I'm sorry, that was a tarantula.
That don't have the advantage of character. Good speech is just about him. So you're really empathizing with him and his struggle. It's a sad, pathetic movie.
The Incredible Shrinking Man is one of the best science fiction films ever made, with a very profound message about not outer space, but inner space, and about the soul, and where does the soul go, and what is infinity? Is infinity out there, or is infinity in here?
Within our fuel range, the planets Venus and Mars. One of these should be our destination. Each of you gentlemen has before you a sheet of paper on which you will write the choice of your destination and a brief explanation of why you've chosen this particular planet.
The space race began with an essay test.
Colonel Wright
Check off list completed.
You need any help?
No, thank you, Major. I'm perfectly capable of getting into the rocket myself.
50s sci-fi might aim at the stars, but the dialogue often remained earthbound.
Approach.
As the imaginary astronauts left Earth behind, they were always on the alert for other things, both science fiction and science fact as predictable. Meteor showers were a standard menace.
I've been through some pretty heavy flak in my day. That's the worst I've ever had thrown at me. Heavenly flak.
Rocket ships would sleep, but they were also moody and rather calm.
They would create love stories in space. They would head for their destinations, living a very terrestrial life, a very almost a soap opera type life.
It's just that being confined like this has gotten on my nerves.
Mine too. You listening, Karen?
To what?
I think that you are a prize package.
Is this for Jim's benefit?
And very feminine. He likes you. I sure do, Mr. Engineer. I don't have to look in a test tube to find out. Look, we got a stowaway aboard.
Weightlessness was a known scientific problem.
Hey, whoa. I need you.
And a narrative issue.
Hope you enjoyed the trip, Colonel. Happy landings, Bill. Thank you, Captain.
They didn't have a way of doing the weightlessness, so there was always the obligatory weightless moment where somebody floats out of a chair, and then they forget about it, and then they're just walking around for the rest of the film, because they could only ever do it once.
You mean this thing is working? No, sir. Not me. Nobody ever told me this was practical. Turn this thing around, you hear? Take me back.
Nobody ever predicted what it would really look like. I mean, look at the LEM, look at the real lunar module. All of the spaceships that ever landed on the moon in science fiction, they were always these pointy things with these big fins at the bottom. Nobody ever predicted this gold foil covered box, with insect legs. It never looked like that because our imagination was never able to predict what would really happen.
You can sometimes imagine other planets as paradises with girls.
Step on it. Don't spare the atoms. We must warn the Queen. Our planet Venus has been invaded.
They look more like Hollywood starlets than space aliens. Anyhow, they were eager to please.
May we serve you, Earthmen?
Their dancing, their music, their leotards were modern. Greenwich Village in outer space.
What gives? Where are all the men around here?
You are the first man I've ever seen.
Well, I mean, we gotta catch up to lost time.
If their costumes were usually pretty spacey, their high heels owed something to Fifth Avenue. There was a hint, a hope, that space girls might be easy.
Ooh, if I'd known there was going to be this kind of competition, I would have undressed for the occasion.
Okay, let's get serious. The way Destination Moon did as early as 1950. It was an attempt to depict space based on what science actually knew at the time.
Destination Moon is an interesting film. I don't like the film particularly. It's an interesting film because only for its moment in history. It's a response to this spread that was run in Collier's magazine of these paintings done by Chesley Bonestell of these gleaming spacecraft that were going to go out to Mars.
Destination Moon was a scientific attempt to create suspense based on no bad guys, no villains, and no aliens.
At the time, it was a very provocative idea because nobody had actually experienced or seen anybody go to the moon.
It was a movie about the celebration of America's power and technology and intellectual capacity to be able to leave the gravitational hold that it's had on us forever and get to the moon for the first time and put men on the moon.
It's kind of like a NASA recruiting film, but NASA didn't even exist yet when that film was made.
A lot of the people at NASA, if you go and ask these people, they're all inspired by that. You know, this is what drove them on. This is what made them say, I want to go to the moon. Because I saw somebody go to the moon. But that was just a movie, son. You go to your science class, and when you get to the 6th grade, you'll see that that's not really possible. I'd like to see us go to the moon. I think we could walk around on that thing. You know, he got into college and got his master's degree, his PhD, and stuff. You know, I still think we can get to the moon. And enough of those guys grew up, and they all went to the moon.
Now bend your elbow as though you were holding a heavy weight. Now your hand.
It's still the 23rd over here.
That's it. Hold it. Okay. That'll be something to show.
What is it, Doc?
You and the Earth. Holding it up like a modern atlas.
There hadn't been a movie as researched and interesting to me without aliens and UFOs and Earth versus the flying saucers until 2001: A Space Odyssey. I actually feel the Destination Moon is the father of 2001. Although I never could get Stanley to admit that he ever saw it.
Rocket Ship XM was a B picture designed to do one thing: beat Destination Moon into theaters. It did. And in its crummy little way, it offered a much darker message.
And Rocket Ship XM is almost the anodyne to Destination Moon. It was a cautionary story about how you're not going to be able to control this technology. They find this Martian civilization that was destroyed by its own technology, and our technology will fail.
Pride in our technology, hubris of a kind, sometimes precedes a tragic fall.
How are we doing?
Not so good.
Well, what's the matter? Everything's worked out so far, right in the nose.
We haven't got enough fuel for landing.
The end of Rocket Ship XM is a view of the Earth filling the viewport as they crash, as they all die.
I'm not afraid anymore. Something happened, like a great wave carrying us up, bearing us, protecting us.
Their last desperate hope is for transcendence.
It's a pretty dark ending. Were they trying to say there will be no exploration without sacrifice? That's something that we're wrestling with right now. We just saw the Columbia disintegrate on entry a couple of years ago.
No, gentlemen. The flight of the RXM was not a failure. Tomorrow we start construction of RXM-2.
All science fiction is this kind of dualistic dance, love-hate relationship with technology. We love it. We have these great machines, these giant star cruisers, but we also build Death Stars that can destroy us. You know, the nuclear bomb can destroy us, but a nuclear-powered spaceship can take us to the star. Forbidden Planet is an amazing film. It was amazing as a technical accomplishment in its day, just for its scope, just for the scale of its imagination.
Every good science fiction film must at least touch the dark side. The film had a great model. It is to some degree a version of Shakespeare's The Tempest.
DC set and punched on, Skipper.
All right, attention. Captain to crew. All hands square away to decelerate. Ship's beeper will, as usual, sound 10 times after lights dim.
Come on, Doc.
DC, bosun. Aye, aye, sir. DC stations. On the double. Want to bounce through this one?
Forbidden Planet also predicted a portion of science fiction's future. The design of the spacecraft and some of its most imaginative technology obviously inspired the look of Star Trek when it came to television a few years later.
At its core is this idea that we are the monsters, that we go out to the alien reaches of the universe and we confront ourselves.
In Forbidden Planet, which I saw...
Anash, it's the 23rd, still over here. It still is.
Forbidden Planet, I remember being beautifully designed in its own 50s way. Could have been Frank Sinatra's living room in Las Vegas, right?
The Walter Pitching character protecting his daughter Anne Francis from the male hormones.
Alta, I specifically asked you not to join us for lunch.
But Father, lunch is over. I'm sure you never said a word about not coming in for coffee. Well, did you or did you?
She was hot. I mean, Anne Francis, my God. I mean, she was I was a kid when I saw that movie, and I wanted her to be my babysitter.
Morning.
Vanguard 3, ready for battle.
Vanguard 1, standing by. Vanguard 4, standing by. Time to get this done. Take out any Imperial fighters you see.
Watch for predictable formations.
Break their formations if you can.
Flying to your position. My pleasure.
Thanks.
Just doing my job.
Hey, thanks.
They locked onto me.
I never heard the concept of the id. I didn't know what that was. I expected the id to show up in the third act to scare me. And when the id didn't...
Moving to your position.
It's an obsolete term. I'm afraid one choose to describe the elementary basis of the subconscious mind.
Empire's locking onto me. I have a tail.
1951 was the movie's first monstrous visit
On my
to
way.
outer space, and the movie's success helped make science fiction the decade's most prolific genre. It arrived, of course, in the era's most talked about space theater.
Oh, it can't. Hey. It's so close.
Yeah. Almost a perfect.
It is. It's wrong.
Finally got one. Wait, bottom line sponsor.
They're locking on.
Attack that target. Vanguard, fire. Shake that tail.
Your shadow shaped in the door. The thing's behind the door. And it bursts into the room. The guy throws the
Let's do this right.
gasoline on it. They shoot the flare pistol.
Blast that, Vanguard. You're all clear. Blast that, Vanguard. Attack that target. This will be close. Come on, Vanguard. Vanguard, fire.
They're locking on. You're welcome.
Good stuff. Now you can do it. Nice work.
Michael Rennie was always one of those great chiseled
That's me, right there.
on screen, but also even more so, he was excellently chosen
mustn't judge us too harshly. I can judge only by what I see. This is quite understandable. Patient with stupidity.
He befriends a young boy who befriends him. And that young boy represents the future of Earth if they listen to Michael Rennie's commandments. If they heed his warnings, young boys like that will grow up and be able to live full lives and be able to perhaps explore the universe without atomic weapons.
I like you, Mr. Carpenter. You're a real screwball.
The best scene in The Day the Earth Stood Still for me is where he goes into the scientist's room with the big blackboard and he completes the equation. It's the scene that I understood as a kid. And I understood that we could live in harmony with another race from another world because mathematics gave us a kind of level playing field.
Did you do it wrong?
He just needs a little help.
That was a picture with a very strong and powerful message that they will not let us continue to experiment with atomic bombs.
So long as you were limited to fighting among yourselves with your primitive tanks and aircraft, we were unconcerned. But soon one of your nations will apply atomic energy to spaceships. That will create a threat to the peace and security of other planets. That, of course, we cannot tolerate.
What exactly is the nature of your mission, Mr. Klaatu?
I came here to warn you that by threatening danger, your planet faces danger. Very grave danger.
They were able to demonstrate their power, but it was amazing. That sequence pays the title off. It's a wonderful scene where everything stops. I assume hospitals didn't stop, and I assume that nobody was killed during this hiatus from technology.
It is no concern of ours how you run your own planet. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder. Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. We shall be waiting for your answer. The decision rests with you.
My dad was an amateur astronomer, and when I looked through the telescope that, by the way, he made for me with his own hands, for the first time I looked at Mars, and the first time I saw Jupiter, and the first time I actually was able to perceive the slight hazy rings of Saturn, I didn't imagine being attacked by those wonders of the universe. For me, it was a journey into discovery. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel a threat from up there.
Mars. They'll be leaving day after tomorrow. I wonder if they'll make it.
And what they'll find if they do.
Life, maybe. Life of some sort.
I know enough about astronomy, I know enough about the scale of the universe, so the Drake equation, the way in which life seems to inhabit every niche, no matter how hostile that we know about. It's almost inconceivable that there isn't life throughout the galaxy and throughout the universe.
Of course there's life in outer space. I mean, you'd have to be nuts not to think there was life in outer space. What that life is, God knows.
Their technology was infinitely superior, but in the 50s, outer space was a terrorist haven.
The aggressive alien, I think, maybe only should exist in entertainment. Because if they're going to come in and aggress and attack, then in a funny kind of way, they're not so superior. If they're carrying that kind of xenophobia.
Who do we send into space? Fighter pilots. We send tough people that can handle the situation. They're going to be survivors, right? So if this guy is a solo pilot from another star system, he's going to survive. We have no idea who we might meet first. It might be a conquering race, or it might be an angelic race that's here to help us.
The invaders from Mars were no angels. They were here to bend our minds. They were the thieves of love and trust. The film was directed by the great art director William Cameron Menzies, who gave it a memorably surreal design on a tiny budget.
Gee whiz!
That movie just, it just undid my world. And I saw that
Vanguard 2, ready for battle.
Vanguard 5, ready for battle.
Vanguard 3, standing by.
We detected an Imperial presence in this system. Pilots, get out there and do what you do best.
Watch for predictable formations.
Pick them off one at a time.
Empire's locking onto me.
You have one behind you, Vanguard 2. Nothing. I caught it on a barbed wire fence.
Don't tell Titan Squadron I'm coming. They have a lock.
Forget about the bad costumes. Forget about the fact that the mutants, as they called them, had zippers up the back of their velour suits.
Let's do this right. Vanguard, I'm inbound. I'm here for you, Vanguard Corps.
Good enough for me.
It's still on the table, Vanguard. But we're only halfway there.
Pick up a tail.
They're locking on. They disabled my ship.
Scientists, it never occurs. You would just think that if our parents are going to destroy the world, children would never do that.
Inbound, I see our target. Flying to your position. What? On my way.
In college, and I had never seen the movie before I was at Long Beach State College, and then I saw the movie on television one day.
The Earthlings are almost like the residents of a third world country. Innocent, eager to welcome and learn from the strangers. They are moles ready for a whacking.
We're friends, yeah? Hey there, open up.
This happened in so many movies where at least we tried to lead with put our best foot forward and show that we are basically good human beings. And we went out there with all sorts of iconography to get them to understand what white flag.
How are they going to understand us? We're talking sign language. They'll understand us all right. Sure. Sure? Everybody understands when you wave the white flag, you want to be friends? Hey there! Open up! Come on out! We're friends! That's right! We welcome you! We're friends! Yeah!
He says, well, everybody understands the white flag. Look what they got. A priest with a prayer book, with a Bible. Walks across, walks towards the machines as he prays. The 23rd Psalm, I believe.
Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
And what does he get for extending the olive branch? He gets lasered. You know, he's gone. You know, he's toast. He's a pile of ash.
He was neither the first nor the last victim. Like our religion, our weaponry was impotent against the invaders.
They're bent on genocide. And I think some of this subliminally came from the Holocaust. I think some of this subliminally came from the information that was coming out every year or so, more and more, about the true extent of what happened.
This genocide spared no one. It was a Holocaust that extended to every corner of the globe. No matter how humble or anonymous you were, there was no way to hide from the Martians' killing machines.
The original book was very fantastic and very exciting, and it took place obviously during World War I and these giant machines, and it was all very fantastic, although a relatively personal story. And then in the 50s, when they redid it, they redesigned the walkers and turned them into sort of spacey, weird aliens, and it was still in essence a monster movie.
Saw the aliens as pre-moral. Don't be fooled by his childlike curiosity and appearance. He's a killer.
That was the state-of-the-art of special effects at that particular point in time. And you look at it now, and it's not as good as the book.
The movie, produced by science fiction specialist George Powell, changed Wells' locale from London to Los Angeles. And the Martian's capacity for devastation was intact. In Steven Spielberg's reimagining of the story, the aliens invade from below the Earth, as well as from the skies above. That's possibly a reference to where they sheltered in the movie that so scared him as a child, Invaders from Mars. Also reset it again in New Jersey, where Orson Welles located his famous radio adaptation of War of the Worlds. But something more than nostalgia went into that decision.
Get down! Just get out! Hold down!
I certainly would have made this War of the Worlds differently pre-9/11. It would have been a little more of a Hollywood science fiction, let's kick their asses as they're kicking our asses. My movie's a little more sober than that, and it's a little more realistic. My movie is more about the American refugee experience. Something that you never hear American refugee in the same sentence. Because my movie is what happens when Americans are put on the run, and we all are migrating away from the danger zones where the aliens are attacking. Heading away from the eastern seaboard, that's an image that is evocative for me in my generation post 9/11.
Robbie, slow down!
Hoped you'd pick that.
Stay together, Robbie. Robbie. Stay together. Robbie! Get back here!
I love documentaries. I watch all World War II documentaries when I can. It's very evocative watching those black and white documentaries showing Parisians who lived a good life heading out of Paris with oxen carts and all their worldly possessions, and these carts are pushing ahead of them. Long queues, miles long, on both sides of the road. These are the images that I remember not by living it, but by watching it on documentaries.
I think you'll be happy with it.
And I really feel that I've tried to bring a little of that to War of the Worlds. But there were certain key touchstones in the book. But the thing that everybody laid off of, and maybe they're right and I was wrong, but I had to go back to Wells, was the red weed, which was in the book. The fact that as they reap and sow, and they basically are harvesting our planet, clearing great swatches of land in order to terraform, replacing our environment with theirs, turning our world into their world.
Rachel, make some noise, baby. Rachel?
Because I was sort of stepping out of character to do War of the Worlds, these were not benevolent aliens, which I'm identified with. I'm identified with E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. As a director, this was my first departure to looking up at the sky and not saying hope and peace, but saying, you know, hate and war and raining down upon us. I mean, that was a big departure for me. And so I had to take a deep breath before saying, do I really want to step out of character in order to go against my real beliefs that there is only peace and olive branches from above?
His conflict is everyone's conflict. It has been since the 50s, when science fiction ceased being an occasional movie event and became a full-time movie genre. We hope our visitors bring a peaceful promise. We fear they bring a terrible swift sword. We know only that they speak in metaphors, both hopeful and fearsome.